Welcome to UBI Unplugged, breaking down the future of income. Glad to be here today to discuss a topic I think is incredibly important, especially in the world we're living in right now.
Thanks for having me. Excited to dive in, but also ready to be unconvinced, maybe? I'm not sold on this whole UBI thing yet.
Happy to be part of this conversation. I'm approaching this from a policy perspective, trying to look at the practicalities, the potential pitfalls, and how we can make UBI work, if it can work at all.
Okay, so let's set the stage. We're talking universal basic income, and more specifically, how it might affect luxury goods and services, craftsmanship, and even accessible luxury experiences. Like, it's a pretty broad area.
Broad is an understatement. You're basically talking about the entire economy. How can UBI, just giving people money, change something like luxury markets? Seems like a stretch.
Well, Otto, it's not just giving people money. It's about changing the economic landscape, right? If people have a basic safety net, they might make different choices about how they spend their disposable income. They might feel more empowered to pursue passions, support local artisans, or even indulge in, say, a really well-made artisanal coffee instead of the usual stuff. The thinking, anyway, is a bottom-up economic stimulus. Will it work as people imagine? That's the real question.
Exactly. It's about shifting priorities and creating a more resilient economy. People aren't just going to hoard the money, they'll spend it. And where do they spend it? Some will spend it on necessities, sure, but others might decide to invest in things they truly value, like quality craftsmanship, unique experiences, or ethically sourced luxury goods. Think about it. Guaranteed income floor provides a level of security that allows people to be more discerning consumers, more thought, less panic buys.
Okay, I see that. People might be willing to spend a bit more on something that's really well made. But are we talking about a significant shift in demand that would actually impact the luxury market in a meaningful way? And what about inflation? If everyone suddenly has more money, doesn't that just drive up prices, negating the benefits?
That's the big inflation question, Otto. And it's something we have to model carefully. The amount of the UBI, the way it's funded, all of that matters. If it's too high, funded irresponsibly, yes, you could see inflation. But if it's carefully calibrated and financed through progressive taxation, for instance, you can mitigate those risks. There have been studies, some suggest the inflationary impact would be manageable. Others are more cautious. The devil is always in the details.
And consider this, even if there is some inflation, a UBI gives people the means to cope with that inflation. They're not left completely vulnerable when prices rise. It's a buffer. And beyond just coping, it allows for something much more fundamental, in my opinion. People are freed from the absolute necessity of the lowest paying, soul crushing job just to survive. It frees up time and energy to pursue education, start a business, or even just volunteer in their community. All things that benefit society as a whole.
Volunteerism? Really? You think people are going to volunteer more if they're getting free money? I think they'll be sitting at home playing video games.
Well, some might, but studies have shown that when people have more economic security, they're actually more likely to engage in their communities. They have the bandwidth to think beyond just their immediate survival. It's about human potential. People want to contribute. They want to be part of something bigger than themselves, but they can't do that when they're constantly stressed about making ends meet.
There's evidence to suggest Jesus is right. Studies on conditional cash transfers in developing countries show increased community participation. A UBI is different, sure, but the principle of economic security fostering civic engagement is there. The question is whether that translates in a developed nation context. And again, policy design is crucial. The messaging around UBI, the way it's implemented, can influence whether people see it as an opportunity to contribute or just an excuse to disengage.
Okay, so let's say hypothetically that UBI does increase demand for luxury goods and services. What kind of luxury are we talking about? Are we talking yachts and private jets? Or are we talking about, a really nice handcrafted leather wallet?
I think it's both. Honestly, the ultra rich will continue to buy yachts and private jets. That's not going to change. But I think the real impact will be on what I'd call accessible luxury, things that are within reach for the average person, but still represent a significant investment in quality, craftsmanship, and ethical production. The wallet, the artisanal coffee, a weekend getaway, to a unique eco lodge, locally made furniture. These are the things that I think would see a surge in demand.
Yes, and that's where the role of craftsmanship comes in. In a post-pandemic world, people are increasingly valuing experiences and authenticity. They want to connect with the story behind the product, with the maker, with the process. They're less interested in mass-produced, disposable goods and more interested in things that are built to last, things that have a story, things that reflect their values. UBI could accelerate that trend by giving people the financial freedom to support these kinds of businesses.
But aren't those businesses already struggling? I mean, small artisans, local craftspeople, they can't compete with big corporations that churn out cheap stuff. How does UBI suddenly level the playing field? They still have higher costs, right?
UBI doesn't magically eliminate the challenges faced by small businesses, but it does give them a fighting chance. It creates a larger pool of customers who are willing to pay a premium for quality and ethical production. It also encourages people to shop locally to support their communities because they're not just scraping by, paycheck to paycheck. They can afford to make conscious choices.
And it's not just about the money. It's about shifting the narrative. We need to actively promote and support craftsmanship. We need to educate consumers about the value of quality, the importance of ethical production, and the benefits of supporting local artisans. Government initiatives like grants or tax breaks for small businesses could complement a UBI and further boost the craft sector. I think it is a multi-pronged approach needed here.
Okay, grants and tax breaks. Sounds like government intervention. Aren't we just creating a whole new set of problems with that? Who decides which businesses get the grants? Isn't that just ripe for corruption and favoritism?
Of course, any government program has the potential for corruption, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try to create programs that support worthwhile causes. We need to design these programs carefully with transparency and accountability in mind. And honestly, the current system is already riddled with subsidies and tax breaks that disproportionately benefit large corporations. Leveling the playing field for small businesses isn't necessarily intervention, it's correcting an existing imbalance.
That's right. There are ways to minimize the risk of corruption. Clear guidelines, independent oversight, public reporting, these are all essential. And the fact that the existing system is flawed isn't an argument against trying to improve it. We should be striving for a system that is fair and equitable for everyone, not just the wealthy and well-connected.
So what about the luxury experience side of things? You mentioned eco-lodges earlier. How does UBI make those more accessible? Those places are expensive.
It's about creating opportunities for people to access these experiences, even if they can't afford the full price. Think about tiered pricing, subsidized programs, or partnerships with nonprofit organizations. Maybe an eco-lodge offers a certain number of discounted stays to low-income families. Or maybe there are scholarships available for people to participate in wilderness retreats or cultural immersion programs. UBI provides the foundation, and then we can build on that with targeted initiatives to make these experiences more inclusive.
Exactly. And it's not just about making luxury experiences cheaper, it's about redefining what we consider to be luxury. Does luxury always have to mean expensive? Can it also mean access to nature, a connection to community, a sense of well-being? A UBI could encourage people to value these kinds of experiences more and to prioritize them over material possessions. Think about national park access being subsidized for UBI recipients, for example.
Okay, but who pays for all of this? Discounted stays, scholarships, subsidized park access. It all adds up. Where does the money come from?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? There are several potential funding mechanisms: progressive taxation, closing tax loopholes, reducing military spending, and even a carbon tax. The key is to find a mix of revenue sources that is both sustainable and equitable. It's never going to be a zero-sum game, and it always involves someone paying something.
The financing is crucial, and it's often the sticking point in policy debates. A carbon tax, for instance, could generate revenue while also incentivizing environmentally friendly behavior. But it could also disproportionately impact low-income households, unless it's carefully designed with rebates or other offsetting measures. There needs to be a lot of careful modeling and analysis to ensure that the funding mechanism doesn't undermine the goals of the UBI itself.
So, what happens to existing social safety nets? Welfare, food stamps, unemployment benefits, do those all go away if we have UBI?
That's a complex question, and there are different schools of thought on it. Some argue that UBI should replace existing programs entirely, streamlining the system and reducing administrative costs. Others argue that UBI should supplement existing programs, providing a basic floor of income while still allowing people to access additional support if they need it. The most likely scenario is a hybrid approach, where some programs are consolidated or phased out, while others are retained to address specific needs.
The interaction with existing programs is a major policy consideration. A poorly designed UBI could actually make things worse for some people if it leads to a reduction in benefits that they rely on. For example, If someone is receiving disability benefits that are higher than the UBI, they could be worse off if those benefits are reduced. We need to ensure that UBI is truly universal and doesn't create new gaps in the social safety net. There's a very real risk of unintended consequences that must be weighed carefully.
Okay, let's talk about work. What happens to the work ethic? If people are getting free money, why would they bother working?
That's the classic argument, isn't it? But the evidence suggests that it's not true. Studies have shown that UBI doesn't lead to widespread work abandonment. People still want to work, they still want to contribute, they still want to earn more than the basic income. What UBI does is give them the freedom to choose better jobs, jobs that are more fulfilling, jobs that pay a living wage. It empowers workers to demand better conditions and fair treatment.
The work disincentive argument is overblown. Most people work for more than just money. They work for a sense of purpose, for social connection, for personal fulfillment. A UBI might lead some people to reduce their working hours or to take time off to pursue education or care for family members. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. It could actually lead to a more productive and engaged workforce in the long run.
But what about the people who do decide to stop working? Who's going to do the essential jobs? The garbage collectors, the fast food workers? Are we going to have a society where only robots do those jobs?
That's where wages come in. If certain jobs are essential but undesirable, we need to pay people more to do them. UBI creates a floor, and then employers have to compete for workers by offering better wages and working conditions. It's a market-based solution to a problem that is currently being addressed by exploiting low-wage workers.
And automation will likely play a role as well. As technology advances, we're going to see more and more jobs being automated. UBI could help us manage that transition by providing a safety net for workers who are displaced by automation. It could also free up human workers to focus on tasks that require creativity, critical thinking, and emotional intelligence, things that robots can't do.
Okay, so let's bring it back to luxury goods and services. How does UBI address the problem of inequality? Isn't luxury consumption inherently unequal? Only the rich can afford to buy expensive things.
UBI doesn't eliminate inequality, but it does reduce it. It provides a basic level of economic security for everyone, which narrows the gap between the rich and the poor, and it allows more people to participate in the economy, both as consumers and as producers. It creates a more level playing field where everyone has a chance to thrive.
And it's not just about income inequality, it's about opportunity inequality. A UPFBI can help to break the cycle of poverty by giving people the resources they need to invest in their education, their health, and their future. It can also empower marginalized communities to start their own businesses and create their own economic opportunities. Access to better education, for example, opens a whole new world of possibilities.
But isn't there a risk that UBI just becomes another entitlement program, creating a culture of dependency? People become reliant on the government and lose their drive to succeed.
That's a common concern, but it's not supported by the evidence. Studies have shown that UBI doesn't lead to widespread dependency. People still want to work, they still want to achieve, they still want to contribute. UBI simply provides them with a foundation of economic security that allows them to pursue their goals without being constantly worried about survival.
And the current system of welfare programs can be just as stigmatizing and disempowering as UBI is feared to be. The bureaucratic hurdles, the conditional requirements, the constant surveillance, these things can trap people in a cycle of poverty. UBI, by contrast, is simple, universal, and unconditional. It treats people with dignity and respect, and it empowers them to make their own choices about their lives.
Okay, so what are the biggest challenges to implementing UBI? What are the things that could go wrong?
The biggest challenges are political and logistical. Getting enough political support to pass a UBI program is a huge hurdle, especially in a polarized political climate. And then there's the challenge of designing a program that is both effective and efficient, that minimizes fraud and waste, and that doesn't create unintended consequences. The scale of such a plan is truly unprecedented, and that is a major hurdle in and of itself.
Exactly. Political will is key. And then there are the practical challenges of implementation. How do you ensure that everyone receives their UBI payment? How do you prevent fraud? How do you adjust the UBI amount over time to account for inflation? These are all complex questions that need to be addressed carefully.
And what about the impact on small businesses? If UBI leads to higher wages, won't that make it even harder for small businesses to compete with big corporations?
That's a valid concern, but UBI also increases demand for goods and services, which can benefit small businesses. And it can also level the playing field by giving small businesses access to a larger pool of workers who are willing to work for fair wages. Plus, as we discussed earlier, UBI can encourage people to shop locally and support their communities, which can be a big boost for small businesses.
And there are things we can do to help small businesses adapt to a UBI economy. Tax credits for small businesses that pay living wages, access to affordable healthcare for small business owners and their employees, and training programs to help small businesses improve their efficiency and competitiveness. These are all things that can help small businesses thrive in a UBI world.
So what's the timeline for all of this? Are we talking about UBI in the next few years, or is this something that's decades away?
That's hard to say. There's growing momentum behind UBI, but there's also a lot of resistance. I think it's likely that we'll see more pilot programs and experiments in the coming years as policymakers try to gather more evidence and build public support. Whether we see a full-scale UBI program in the next few years depends on a lot of factors, including the political climate, the state of the economy, and the results of those pilot programs.
I agree. Pilot programs are essential. We need to test different models of UBI in different contexts, and we need to carefully evaluate the results. We also need to engage in a broad public conversation about the pros and cons of UBI so that people can make informed decisions about whether or not they support it. The timeline is uncertain, but the conversation is happening now, and that's a good thing.
Okay, so let's say that UBI is implemented successfully. What does the future look like? What kind of society do we create?
I think we create a more just equitable and prosperous society. A society where everyone has the opportunity to thrive, where people are free to pursue their passions, and where communities are strong and resilient. A society where we value human potential and where we invest in the well-being of all.
I think we create a society that is more adaptable and resilient in the face of economic change. A society where people are less vulnerable to automation and globalization, and where they are more empowered to shape their own economic destinies. A society where we can address some of our most pressing social problems like poverty, inequality, and lack of access to healthcare and education.
A utopian vision. I'm still not entirely convinced, but I appreciate the conversation. You've given me a lot to think about.
That's all we can ask for, Otto. It's a complex issue with no easy answers, but it's a conversation worth having. Thank you both for your thoughtful contributions today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's been a stimulating discussion,